President says he'll press Xi on soybean purchases, fentanyl, and NVIDIA chip exports. Beijing's curbs on rare earths and Trump's massive tariff hikes on China will also be on the table. So, EJ, you're watching what's going on in Asia. We've been debating fiercely on this show how much it matters. But take us into the U.S. economy for a second, okay? We get big numbers in these deals, whether it's South Korea, I think it's $350 billion. Japan is like $490 billion. Investment coming in. Now, those are pledges. I don't think they've happened yet. But you've also got an economy where clearly the job picture is sluggish right now. Mm-hmm. How much do these deals make a near-term difference for getting that job market picked up, kind of in line with the GDP projections we're seeing?
Sure. Well, so, Brian, this is the big advantage to investment, right? You get both a short-term boost, but you also get the long-term boost. What's the short-term? Well, if your investment is going to be for things like Toyota building a factory here, what does that do? It means you immediately get some construction jobs. After that factory is up and running, now you have the manufacturing jobs to run it. And then all of the different ways in which the supply chain is affected. So you get jobs in not just making cars, but now making steel, making electronics, rubber, glass, you name it. Right? So there's kind of a, I don't want to say a trickle down, but maybe a spillover. There are all these related industries that are going to be benefited as well. So again, that's the beauty of investment. Consumer spending is great because we need to consume today, but investment in a lot of ways is better because, again, you get the boost to the economy today and then it continues for quarters and years to come.
I mean, I agree with the logic there, Jackie. For me, the issue is like timelines. Mm-hmm. So how soon does this happen? How fast do these investments break ground? How quickly do you get the hiring? And look, let's just make it a little bit political. You've got midterm elections in 2026, okay? So do these things happen fast enough for people to walk into 2026 and say, I feel good about my job prospects. I feel like this economy's humming and it's working for Main Street, you know, not just Wall Street investors?
Some yes, some no. It won't be fully fleshed out by then. But I do think enough people see what the president has done with the big, beautiful bill, tax incentives, not just for individuals, but also small businesses. The extension of the 2017 tax cuts were very, very important for small business in this country, and also for corporations to be able to reinvest and do more, creating the situation where we'll have growth. I just want to pivot to China for 1 second. Yep. Because I think there's a huge piece of this that we sort of set up from the top, that the fentanyl piece, which is really where a lot of the grievances, I would say, started with China to begin with. The president, remember, had instituted a separate fentanyl tariff on Chinese goods just to punish them for that. So people are starting to do the math here and say, if President Xi comes to the table and he's willing to do more on that front, he could negotiate himself down from a 20% tariff to, say, a 10% tariff, which would then average out and bring down all of his overall tariffs. So I think he's going to start there because that's low-hanging, easier fruit for him. And that's one of the things that the president really wants to make headway on. The other thing is the rare earth aspect of it, where if he can negotiate Trump some time, whether it's a year or 2 years, he's already working on his diversification plan. And I think the United States will be in good shape not to rely on China in that way. So I think that's sort of a point where they lose, unless they want to bang down the hammer and be really difficult and cut us off tomorrow, which I would cut off their nose in spite of their face. I don't think that would be really smart. But these are some of the aspects of this particular negotiation and the art of the Trump deal that I find fascinating. I can't wait to see this play out.
I can't either. Lydia, let me throw one at you and see if you'll bite on this.
Okay.
TikTok will be on the table. Mm-hmm. Some people say having TikTok on the table gives America something that we maybe shouldn't really want in the first place, and it's going to give Xi a little bit of leverage to get something he wants.
Yeah.
Do you like that TikTok's going to be part of the conversation, or do you wish we had just let it die on the vine?
I think the reality is that it's there. It doesn't matter. It's not going to go anywhere. And I think for so many Americans, it's part of their social media diet that they want back. And in fact, I want to be a part of the conversation on TikTok, but I'm waiting for that clarity about exactly how it's owned, how it's operated, how is that data being managed. And those are some of the details that we're still waiting to learn. I want to echo and underscore exactly what Jackie said about the fentanyl deal. I think that is so maybe one of the most impactful probably portions of this deal that it has impacted way too many Americans. Fentanyl pouring over our borders and recognizing where the origin of that problem is. the way in which President Trump has gone about imposing the fentanyl tariffs, we know is subject of ongoing litigation. The Supreme Court is going to be hearing oral arguments about that next week. But I would say any conversation about fentanyl that would stop the flow of those drugs into this country, people will look at that and say, who cares? If he got it done and maybe he did it in a way that Congress doesn't like or that litigants don't like, it doesn't matter. I think that is such a big deal and would be a victory for him. You know, we can look back at China, you know, in 2020, there was a deal. Larry Kudlow was a part of negotiating it and has reminded us so wisely many times that they just didn't play by the rules, even when they agreed to it then. That always reminds me to keep expectations low when it comes to China.
Right.
But I was encouraged today to read a headline from Reuters that said China just bought some soybean cargoes from the U.S. for the first time this year.
A little good faith going into the negotiation,
I'm
maybe?
just saying that's exactly the way I read it. I think they're trying to play nice ahead of the actual sit down.
Okay, so Brianna, let me ask you then, because I've been very persuaded by Larry that these guys make deals all the time that they don't keep. And I think fentanyl could be in that category. Soybeans have been in that category. Rare earths, they flip-flopped. So what should Americans expect out of this? What should our standard be for a win? Knowing that when you negotiate with China, what they say historically has not been what you've gotten.
Yeah, and I think for TikTok, for that aspect, I don't necessarily think we should be excited either way, because I don't think China necessarily wants to give what the United States wants. To the fentanyl point, to snowball on this, I think the average American knows that any win on fentanyl is something tangible that the average American who's not engaged in politics or business can understand as a win for President Trump versus tariffs. It's not really digestible at the kitchen table. Talking about fentanyl at the kitchen table, President Trump stopping that flow is something that's good. And to the rare earths minerals, we were just talking about this last segment. Look, President Trump struck somewhat of a deal with Malaysia, but it's still unclear because Malaysia is now saying, well, we're not actually going to, get rid of our ban on rare earth minerals. They've also been working with China over the past few weeks. So I think President Trump going over there and trying to hammer out details with China for rare earths might send a signal to Malaysia and other countries that we're trying to diversify with that it is an open market. You should be involved with the United States and don't cozy up to Beijing because they might stab you in the back the way they've essentially done to the United States and other countries.
EJ, I've read Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and what he's been saying lately, and he's made some curious comments, interesting comments around what China's done in rare earths has been kind of a China versus the world thing.
Right.
Okay,
right.
And my view has been, and this may be too strong, but my view has been, I think ultimately with China as a communist country, decoupling in key areas at least is the only realistic alternative to what we've got going right now. From an economic standpoint, is that suicide for us, or is that actually where we should be going?
Well, it's one thing if you could flip a switch and instantly do it today, right? Then you might bring up that discussion of economic suicide. But I don't think that's what anybody's talking about, because it wouldn't just be suicide for us; it's suicide for China too, right? They are, as bringing up the Treasury Secretary, as he has pointed out many times, they are the most lopsided economy in the world today. They are so overly dependent on their export market that if you do shut that off, I mean, it's game over for them. Xi has enough problems as it is with things like youth unemployment and prices right now. There's no way he can make the situation for himself even worse, I think, and still hold on to power.
How big are his problems? We've heard people say they're huge. How big are they? How do you know, even with an economy that never tells you the truth on their economic statistics?
Great question. So one of the things that we have to do, for example, to figure out how much are they actually exporting, because you can't trust their numbers, you have to try to go around to the rest of the world and figure out what percentage of their imports are from China and add all of that up and do all the exchange rates and everything else, and then try to figure out, okay, how close is China's published figure to reality? It's a lot of work. It's difficult to do. But sure enough, you can see that, as you said, they're not publishing real numbers. They haven't for years.
But what we're finding in doing that work is suggesting their economy is in very, very rough shape right now. Xi does not have leverage when it comes to strength of his economy.
Sure, and they are pouring in both fiscal and monetary stimulus, right? As much as they can right now to try to keep that thing going.
One area where the U.S. and China are in fierce competition is EVs, Jackie, Tesla. What's going on?
Preparing to name a new CEO if shareholders do reject Elon Musk's proposed $1 trillion pay package and he resigns. So Tesla's chair says that Musk's successor would likely be someone from within the company. The vote is scheduled for next Thursday. I can just say this. This would not be a situation where, for example, Steve Jobs dies and Tim Cook
Right.
takes over, obviously you have no option. Investors and Wall Street will not like Elon Musk resignation of this company, especially since he really doesn't have to. And pay packages, listen, if he's worth it, he's worth it. The shareholders can decide.
Can I betray, Lydia? I saw you take a real deep breath when I read that little point about Elon Musk. Is that irrecoverable for Tesla if he's gone?
I was just thinking, what would Tesla be without Elon Musk? I mean, Tesla is Elon, Elon is Tesla. I just can't imagine that shareholders would actually go for that and what that would mean for the company.
I think Elon's got a lot of leverage in this little negotiation going on.